You wake up in the middle of the night, and you don't know why. Your heart is beating a little faster than it should be. The room is quiet, your partner is asleep. Everything looks fine from the outside, and yet something inside you feels like a storm that has no name. You tell yourself it's nothing. You close your eyes. You try to breathe through it. By morning, you've already convinced yourself you overreacted, and you move forward with your day carrying that unnamed weight like it was always supposed to be there. But what if it wasn't? What if that silent storm has been trying to tell you something for years, and no one ever taught you how to listen to it? This video is about that storm. It is about the kind of anxiety that doesn't look like anxiety at all, the kind that hides behind productivity and perfectionism and people-pleasing, the kind that makes you look incredibly capable on the outside while quietly dismantling you from within. Silent anxiety in women is one of the most underdiagnosed, most misunderstood, and most normalized forms of psychological suffering in the modern world. And by the end of this video, you will understand why it happens, how it works inside your brain and body, and most importantly, what it has been silently costing you all this time. Let's start with the truth that most people don't want to say out loud. Women are twice as likely as men to experience anxiety disorders, and yet they are far less likely to be taken seriously when they report the symptoms. For decades, the clinical picture of anxiety that was studied, documented, and treated was predominantly based on male presentations. That means the racing heart, the shortness of breath, the visible panic, the inability to function. But female anxiety, particularly silent anxiety, often looks completely different. It looks like a woman who is always prepared for the worst. It looks like someone who apologizes constantly, who finds it difficult to say no, who lies awake at night running through every possible way a conversation could go wrong. It looks like high achievement powered by fear rather than joy. And because it doesn't look like a breakdown, no one treats it like one. Imagine you are sitting in a meeting at work. You've prepared thoroughly, you know your material, and yet the moment you think someone in the room might have responded to your comment with a slightly raised eyebrow, your brain launches into a spiral that takes you hours to recover from. Did I say something wrong? Did I offend them? Are they now thinking less of me? You can't focus on the rest of the meeting because your nervous system is already in threat detection mode, scanning for danger that isn't there in the way you're interpreting it. That is not weakness. That is silent anxiety doing exactly what it was trained to do. To understand why this happens, you have to understand a bit about the neuroscience behind the anxious female brain. The amygdala, which is the part of your brain responsible for detecting threats and triggering fear responses, is generally more reactive in women than in men due to a combination of hormonal influences and socialization. Estrogen amplifies amygdala activity, which is why many women notice that their anxiety spikes during certain phases of their menstrual cycle, particularly in the days before their period when estrogen drops sharply. This is not a character flaw. This is biology interacting with psychology, and the result is a nervous system that is often running on a higher baseline of alertness than most people around you will ever understand. But biology alone does not explain the silence. The silence is cultural. From the time you were a very young girl, the world around you began teaching you a set of rules about what it means to be an acceptable woman. Be kind. Be helpful. Don't take up too much space. Don't be too loud, too demanding, too needy, too much. Smile when you are uncomfortable. Stay calm when you are afraid. Handle it. The problem is that when you spend years suppressing your fear response in order to appear manageable and calm, you don't eliminate the fear. You just drive it underground. And underground is exactly where silent anxiety lives. Think about a woman named Sarah. Sarah is 34 years old, works in finance, is in a long-term relationship, and by every external measure, she is thriving. But Sarah hasn't had a full night's sleep in 2 years. She checks her email at 11 at night, not because she enjoys it, but because something inside her feels like if she doesn't stay on top of everything, something terrible will happen. She doesn't know what that something is, she just knows the feeling of it, that low hum of dread that she has learned to treat as background noise. Sarah doesn't think she has anxiety because she functions. She meets her deadlines. She shows up. But functioning is not the same as flourishing. And the gap between those two words is where silent anxiety makes its home. Sarah's nervous system is what researchers call chronically activated. This means that her body's stress response, the cascade of cortisol and adrenaline that is meant to help you escape genuine danger, is running almost continuously, even when there is no immediate threat. Over time, this has significant consequences. Chronic cortisol elevation disrupts sleep, impairs memory, weakens the immune system, and contributes to inflammation throughout the body. It also literally reshapes the brain, strengthening the neural pathways associated with threat detection and fear, and weakening the prefrontal cortex's ability to provide rational perspective. In other words, the longer silent anxiety goes unaddressed, the more convincing it becomes.
Your brain becomes better and better at finding reasons to be afraid.
One of the most insidious features of silent anxiety in women is that it often disguises itself as virtuous behavior. The woman who is always early because being late feels catastrophic. The woman who researches every possible option before making any decision because uncertainty is intolerable. The woman who overthinks every text message before sending it, then replays the sent message for hours, wondering if it landed wrong. The woman who can't delegate because giving up control feels physically unsafe. All of these behaviors look from the outside like conscientiousness, like responsibility, like being a good person. And so they get rewarded rather than questioned, which only reinforces the anxiety further. Moving deeper into the psychological mechanisms at play here, one of the core drivers of silent anxiety is what psychologists call intolerance of uncertainty. This refers to the tendency to find ambiguous situations deeply distressing, to need to know outcomes in advance in order to feel safe, and to interpret uncertainty itself as a signal of danger. Women with high intolerance of uncertainty often spend enormous amounts of mental energy trying to predict and control outcomes that are, by their very nature, unpredictable and uncontrollable. And the more energy they spend on this, the more exhausted they become, and the more their anxiety convinces them that the exhaustion is proof they need to try harder, not that they need to rest. Imagine you send a message to a close friend and they don't respond for 3 hours. In a baseline state, you might assume they are busy. But when silent anxiety is running the show, your brain might take those 3 hours on a very different journey. Did I say something that upset her? Is she pulling away from me? What if I've somehow damaged this friendship without even realizing it? You might find yourself going back through past conversations, looking for evidence of what you might have done wrong. By the time your friend replies with a simple, "Sorry, was in a meeting," your nervous system has already lived through an emotional experience that felt entirely real. That is the exhausting, invisible labor of silent anxiety. Beyond the interpersonal domain, silent anxiety in women frequently expresses itself through the body in ways that are often misdiagnosed or dismissed entirely. Tension headaches that appear without apparent cause, jaw clenching during sleep, digestive issues that come and go without a clear pattern, a tight feeling in the chest that doctors assure you is not cardiac, fatigue that sleep doesn't seem to resolve. These are somatic expressions of emotional states that have no other outlet, and they are incredibly common in women who have learned to suppress their internal experience in order to maintain the appearance of composure. The body keeps the score, as the research has long demonstrated, and it will find ways to speak the language of distress even when the conscious mind has decided to stay quiet. Consider a woman named Maya. Maya grew up in a household where showing emotion was treated as a weakness. Her mother prided herself on being strong, which in practice meant never crying, never complaining, never asking for help. Maya internalized this template so deeply that by the time she reached adulthood, she had almost no conscious access to her own emotional states. She didn't know when she was sad. She didn't know when she was afraid. What she did know was that she often felt a pressure in her chest that made it hard to breathe deeply, that her stomach was almost always slightly unsettled, and that she could never fully relax, even during moments that were objectively pleasant. Maya spent years going to doctors trying to solve these physical problems before a therapist finally helped her see the connection between her body's distress and the emotional life she had never been allowed to have. This is one of the most important points in understanding silent anxiety, and it deserves to stay with you. Suppression does not equal resolution. When you push an emotion down, when you tell yourself you are fine, when you perform calm because calm is what is expected of you, that emotion does not disappear. It transforms. It moves from the realm of the psychological into the realm of the physiological, and it starts expressing itself in symptoms that feel random and disconnected, but are in fact the language of a nervous system that is trying desperately to communicate what words have been forbidden from saying. Another layer of silent anxiety that rarely gets discussed is the way it shapes a woman's relationship with her own needs and desires. When your nervous system is chronically activated, when your baseline state is one of low-grade alert, it becomes very difficult to know what you actually want. Desire requires a certain degree of inner safety. It requires the ability to sit with yourself quietly enough to hear your own wants without immediately filtering them through the question of whether they are acceptable to the people around you. Women with silent anxiety often describe a profound disconnection from their own desires, a sense that they know how to take care of everyone else, but have no clear sense of what they themselves need or even enjoy. This is not selflessness. This is the self-erasure that anxiety eventually demands as payment. Think about a moment when someone asked you what you wanted for dinner, and instead of answering from your actual preference, you automatically deferred to what you thought would cause the least conflict or inconvenience. Now multiply that moment by thousands of decisions, small and large, over years and decades, and you begin to understand how profoundly silent anxiety can hollow out a woman's relationship with her own inner life.
Every time you override your genuine response in favor of the safe, accommodating, unanxious-seeming response, you send a message to your nervous system that your internal reality is not safe to express. And your nervous system files that information and becomes even more vigilant the next time around.
At this point in the conversation, some of you might be recognizing yourself in what you're hearing and feeling a complicated mixture of relief and grief. Relief because finally something makes sense. Grief because you are beginning to understand how long this has been going on without you knowing what to call it. That is a valid and important place to arrive. And it raises the question that this entire video has been building toward. What do you do with this? How do you begin to unlearn a pattern that is woven so deeply into the way you experience the world? The research on treating silent anxiety points consistently toward a few core principles. The first is awareness, which is not just about knowing intellectually that you have anxiety, but about developing the ability to notice it in real time, to catch the moment when your nervous system begins to escalate and name it for what it is.
This is harder than it sounds because silent anxiety has often been with you for so long that its baseline state feels completely normal. Developing awareness requires a willingness to get curious about your inner experience, to ask yourself throughout the day not just how you are performing, but how you are actually feeling, and accessible. Practices like slow, extended exhalation breathing activate the parasympathetic nervous system and counteract the cortisol-driven state of chronic alert. Physical movement, particularly rhythmic movement like walking, helps discharge the stress hormones that have accumulated in your body. Somatic practices that help you develop awareness of physical sensation teach your nervous system that it can be present in the body without the body being dangerous. These are not luxuries. For a nervous system shaped by years of silent anxiety, they are medicine. The third principle, and perhaps the most countercultural one for women socialized to be endlessly accommodating, is permission. Permission to have needs, permission to communicate discomfort, permission to say no without a detailed explanation, permission to be imperfect in ways that are visible to other people. Every time you give yourself this permission and survive the discomfort of it, every time you say what you actually think and the relationship doesn't collapse, every time you set a boundary and the world keeps turning, you send new data to your nervous system. You teach it slowly and repeatedly that you are safe to exist as you actually are. There is a woman on the other side of this process who is worth describing because she is waiting for you, and you should know what she looks like. She is not the version of you that has no anxiety, because that is probably not a realistic destination for anyone with this neurological wiring. She is the version of you who knows what she is feeling, who can name the storm instead of being swept away by it, who moves through her day with enough of herself present to actually enjoy the moments that are worth enjoying, who makes decisions from her actual values rather than from fear of getting it wrong, who can be in a relationship, a friendship, a professional environment, without disappearing inside the effort to manage everyone else's perception of her. She is quieter inside, not numb, not suppressed, but genuinely, biologically quieter. And she is not as far from where you are now as the anxiety wants you to believe. If this video has spoken to something real in you, I want you to do something that might feel small but is actually significant. Go to the comments below and type the word "seen." Just that one word, because that is what every woman living with silent anxiety deserves: to be seen, to be understood, to have her invisible experience finally named and validated. And if you are not already subscribed to this channel, this is your invitation, because this conversation is not going to stop here. Every week, we go deeper into the psychology of what it means to be a woman navigating this world with honesty and with courage, and I want you to be part of that. You have been quiet for a long time. It is time to let someone finally hear you.